Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening if you're watching the recording. Welcome to what is my favourite time of the week. I'm Steve Pallas. This is Esports Friday, and without any further delay, we'll introduce sports community's very own esport guru, Cameron Osterland. Cameron, welcome back to Esports Friday.
Yeah, I had a week off. Thank you for welcoming me back. It was you held the fort very well. I was very impressed with how you handled something you know very little about without the guru present. So well done.
I handled it the way I handle most things. I rang someone and called in a favour that knows exactly what the hell they were talking about. So, Andrew Walton, um, first of all, thank you, Andrew, if you're watching, for bailing me out last week. But the conversation was thought provoking, and Cam, I know we had a number of chats this week, and what struck me about esport, gaming and esport, is there's so many similarities to traditional sport, and there's so much esport can learn from traditional sport, but there's so much traditional sport can learn from esport, and that just made Esport Friday even more appealing for me. So, but it's great to have you back.
Yeah, yeah. It is quite interesting, isn't it? I was just saying to you off air, which I feel is a good thing to bring up right now. That the similarities between team sport and things you would play in the park have helped me play these sorts of sports at a higher level than I otherwise may have been able to, because my understanding from sport growing up playing sport out on the grass translates really well to team-based esports. And so my actual playing ability in a game like Rocket League is much lower than the level that I'm able to play at, just because of how well I can read the game and, kind of compensate for lack of a better word. I don't want to talk myself down, but, I compensate for my lack of technical ability by having a really good reading of the game and understanding of the game, because it is quite similar. But today, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's what's on the screen at the moment is Rocket League, which is effectively, and I asked the question before, what is Rocket League? And it's effectively two teams, rocket cars trying to get a ball in a goal. Sounds similar to, as you say, hockey and soccer and a number of other sports.
Yeah, so it can be played by a single person, one versus another. But by and large, it's a team based, either 2, 3, or 4 person teams. When you get to the esport competition, the very highest level, it's generally 3-player teams. And yeah, you play in a little circuit. It's an enclosed space, so the ball can't leave. Kind of like playing maybe indoor soccer, for example, where you just keep playing on because you've got the nets to help you, which is a lot of fun. But there's a lot of similarities with the ball, of course, being a round ball, so it's kind of got some things borrowed from soccer. And then there's a lot of similarities with hockey as well. A lot of people find it to be the way the game develops and the way the game is kind of played to be very reminiscent of ice hockey. But yeah. It's if you take a bit of time to watch it, you do generally find some similarities that can help you get across, which is why I've kind of taken some time to focus on Rocket League as opposed to some of the other games like StarCraft, League of Legends, Fortnite, which are very unfamiliar as far as how they look to the average person, because they're a very different thing. Obviously, all the team mechanics are still there. You still have to be able to have some very good communication skills. You need to be able to work very well as a team. But the game itself is very different and probably doesn't look very familiar to people who've never participated in anything like this. How do you find this, Steve? Do you look at it and go, okay, yeah, I can kind of see, a couple of elements that look familiar, or does it still look very
No.
foreign?
It does. Goal and ball and moving the ball up the field. It's I guess we're really excited. Just moving off Rocket League just for a moment, Cam, and I know we'll come back to it in just a moment, but we're really excited next week that Nigel Smart from the Adelaide Crows, Chief Operating Officer of the Adelaide Crows, no less, but oversees their esport program and their esport team legacy. He's going to join us next week, and we're really excited about that. The other thing, Cam, that you may not realise about what the Adelaide Crows do is they have created a high school tournament, which is really, really cool, and we'll explore that next week as well. But Legacy, like so many other teams, is a professional esport team, same as Adelaide Crows or our mighty Tigers in this side of the world. My question to you this week, Cam, is there a pathway similar to normal sports, like traditional sports? We go to our community clubs, then we might go to the bottom of the elite program, into state competitions, international, and into professional teams or whatever. How does someone move from playing against their mates to potentially being good enough to be identified and by these professional teams and team owners and part of that professional circuit? Is there up and down like there is in I guess, physical traditional sport?
Yeah, so I think if we start from a bit of what's the best way? So some high level real sport like AFL, the A League, the NRL, it's kind of like invitation only, right? You have to either purchase a license or you need to be invited to the league. But then the pathways exist below it. But at the top level, it's very much you only get in when you have a certain requirement set that's met, or the league decides they want to expand, so they put it out to tender. Those sorts of things. Some of that can exist in esport, but what happens in Rocket League is more aligned with what happens at a grassroots level of sport, where say the round ball game, association football, my favorite, my pastime. You want to get a group of people together to participate at any level of football in almost the world, Australia being an exception. You start by creating a team, and you get a community group together, or you a bunch of mates together, perhaps, and you find a competition that is open to you as a group, and you join it. That's very similar to how Rocket League works all around the world. So the one difference that happens in Rocket League to Australia with association football is that you can't get to the A-League. You can't get to the absolute pinnacle. But if we go to England, for example, where the English Premier League, the biggest soccer tournament competition in the world, outside of maybe the Champions League, you can literally go to the very bottom of that sport, enter a team, and then progressively work your way up the chain of the leagues all the way up to the one day becoming a professional team. And obviously, we're kind of glazing past the requirement for facilities and perhaps outside help, but it's a very similar set of circumstances. So if you were to, and just not looking at player identification and talent pathway, because that's a whole nother ball game. You trying to find out how to become a professional player is very different to the way the team would enter a competition. So I can't speak on the very well on the side of player identification and talent identification. But I think generally speaking, once you work your way up through the game itself, you get to a higher rank. Eventually you become known, identified. They have their own ladder systems within games that probably help some of the people progress up the pathway just by playing, just by every day grabbing a bunch of mates or playing on their own, depending on the sport. So with Rocket League, anyone can enter. So if you were a football club or a cricket club, or you wanted to develop your own esports wing or team, it's just a case of getting the requirement set for the players you need. So with Rocket League, this is the Rocket League page for the requirements. The requirements are that the players are at least 15 years of age. You're for the championship series in America or Europe, you need to be a resident. So if it's in Australia, you need to be a resident. You have to be prepared to provide proof of eligibility. So basically, either your passport or something that proves that you're a citizen or that you're of a legal age. And then you have a team requirement to have at least 3 players. So that's for their 3v3 competition. So this is obviously for the EU competition, but it's the same in the Oceanic version. So that's it. That's all you need. It's not like there's a set of you don't have to go through any hoops. You just need your players to be of a certain age, and that's not trying to stop kids from playing. It's probably more just a safety thing and a requirement, a legal obligation. So when it comes to trying to get younger players to play, it's not that they can't play the game. It's just that they can't compete at an esports level and I think that probably comes down to money at the end of the day. So yeah, that's all you need. You get your team together. So if you hold some tryouts, or you've got a bunch of teenagers or some of your adult staff or whoever's in part of your community club that want to put in a team for a competition, then you just sign up. You'd literally just come here and click the link and enter your club into the competition. So they hold open tournaments, which is open to anybody, anyone, everywhere in the world. They probably exclude the esports teams from participating in the open tournament because it would be a bit lopsided. But they try to get a few people who they can potentially put up against some of the esports teams. So a few weeks ago, I was talking about the Spring Series, and that was their kind of COVID replacement for what would normally have happened, where they hold an online open qualifier that's over a few days or a couple of weeks. You rock up, you play. If you win, you progress. And then eventually you get to the final stages where they have, I think, maybe 32 teams left. And then they start putting those teams up against some of the already existing esports teams. And if you continue to win, eventually you earn yourself a place at the very top where you can participate for money, for a professional stake in the game. So it feels quite similar to the progression of a grassroots league, at least the ones that I know of.
Well, and also tennis, working on that open. That's the Australian Open, means anyone can come as long as you fit the criteria, which world rankings and potentially qualifying or wildcard entries. So is there community level competitions where, say, I'm in Echuca today, so the Echuca Football Club could put in a team playing Rocket League, for instance, against the Perth Wildcats team, for instance, and they're just the equivalent of community sport, barefoot bowlers, if you like, the equivalent, just social competition. Is there competitions around for that sort of level of participation?
Yeah, absolutely there is. I couldn't tell you straight off the top of my head what the names of the places that do it, but Big Pond and Game Arena used to be the big top dog in that area. It's moved around from time to time. Some people can have had success over others, and then it's moved around a bit. But there certainly are some, I guess, third-party facilitators that arrange tournaments where you can go into a ladder, so kind of like a season. And you put in your team and then participate against other people. The downside in those sorts of areas is that there's not any kind of restrictions on the quality of the player or the level of a player. So you might find sometimes games to be a bit lopsided, depending on how well backed the leagues are. But there certainly is that kind of season-based competition for a whole range of the virtual sports. In a variety of different places. It'd be very difficult for me to show you them all for a whole bunch of different esports, but yes, they absolutely exist. Rocket League also has just a tournament structure within it, which I can quickly show you, where anyone can create a tournament just by going to this little button here. And within here, this is open to anyone, or it's not. Like, you can have them restricted. You can have private tournaments. You can have open tournaments. You can have rank restricted tournaments, these sorts of things. So that, some people use this as a way to gain exposure on Twitch. They hold tournaments and they broadcast them. But this could be an avenue for a club to hold a tournament with, their players or their members, to have a set time and have everyone log in. And when you get into the structure, it sets up all of your here the brackets. You can't see it because I haven't entered the competition, but it would automatically do all of that for you. So it would help you run the competition and help you find a victor. Or
so even at association level, you could set up your own association competition for so all your clubs could enter teams, for instance. And
yeah, absolutely. And so you can also play. You can also play private matches. I think, there it is, private match. So if you have, we've spoken about third-party tournament website, software platforms, that sort of thing before. So if you wanted to create your own community-based league, the game itself, and pretty much every single virtual sport or esport would have a private match function. So you can just have a schedule outside of the game. You have an agreed time where people rock up, and then you just join each other in the name. And they can be password protected so that only the right people are getting in there. You can also spectate them so that you can watch from. So if your club wanted to hold a final, a grand final, for example, you could have everybody watching online, or when the restrictions are completely gone, we could have big watch parties and have everybody compete in front of us and do those sorts of things. So there's everything you can do in real sport, you can absolutely do as far as the competition's concerned in esport. The other thing I should mention is a lot of games have their own ranking systems. So up here we've got casual and competitive. This system here for competitive, it ranks you and gives you a bit of a number based on your performance. So the more you win, the higher you progress. And if you start losing a lot, you start to go down. So within the actual game as well, there's often a way to find competitive matches around Australia, or if you want to go overseas, around the other countries that you're in. But obviously, there's lag if you go to play in America, but you can have cross sea competitions as well if you ever want to, like we've seen with some cricket clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really, really interesting. I mean, one of the questions that I'm going to ask Nigel next week is, does he believe in the fullness of time that our traditional community sports clubs will have, we just pretend it, or, just imagine for a moment we're a bowls club, your barefoot bowls, your social competition bowls, your pennant bowls, and your esport team. It's just another participation option that club offers its members and its participants. I'll be really interested to see if that's where Nigel thinks that community sport will go. So, Cam, I'm very conscious of time. So have you got anything else to show us today on this journey from community to elite, or have we covered it all?
Hopefully I've outlined as much of it as I can. The Rocket League Esports have their own website if you wanted to get a bit more information on it. This is last year's competition, for example. We spoke about the tennis before. They have an esport competition, which I know you spoke about last week with Andrew. They also hold sign-ups for that as well, so you could potentially enter your team into the Australian Open esports competition as well. This is a community competition that's going on right now, the community tournament. So there's opportunities happening right now for competitive gameplay. And if you wanted to get involved, you do obviously need to purchase the game. And we've spoken about the platforms that you need to be on. and it's either purchased online through you can do it through the PlayStation Store or through the Steam Store, which we've shown people before. EB Games is the only physical place I managed to find where they sell it, where you can go and get a hard copy, a CD or a DVD or whatever it is for your chosen console. And it's much cheaper on PC. It's only $30, $28.95 for PC versus roughly around $50. But then EB Games, not usually the cheapest to begin with. But yeah, no, that's about it as far as the pathway. Hopefully I've explained it well. If you do have any more questions, please feel free to ask us, because hopefully I can provide a bit more clarity if you are looking for a bit more guidance on how you can enter one of these competitions. But otherwise, hopefully we've covered it pretty well, Steve.
Yeah, Cameron, one of the things I learned today, just picking out, was that the platforms typically have that functionality for you to create your own tournament and club versus club, groups of mates versus groups of mates, and just experience esport in a nice, safe environment, socially, which is what we love about our clubs. So, Cameron, as normal, welcome back. It's great to have you back. And I look forward to next week on Esports Friday when we were joined with Nigel Smart from the Adelaide Crows. So for now, as my morning tea is delivered, thank you very much, Ness. I say thank you to you, Cam, and thank you for everyone for being part of our sports community.